Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking a piece of history that honestly feels like a Hollywood thriller. But the crazy part? Every single chaotic, destructive moment of it actually happened. We're going to see exactly how a massive financial crime empire was built from the ground up, and then, piece by piece, how it was brutally dismantled. It's a real roller coaster.
He lied about a $1 stock, made millions, and only served 22 months in jail. And the wildest part? People still cheer for him. Wow, let that sink in. This quote really forces us to ask a super uncomfortable question, right? How does someone commit such massive fraud, devastate literally thousands of lives, get a slap on the wrist, and somehow emerge as a pop culture hero? Well, to figure that out, let's trace the footsteps of Jordan Belfort.
Okay, Chapter 1, The Birth of a Salesman.
So, Jordan Belfort was born in 1962 in Bayside, Queens. Now, this was a working-class neighborhood where dreams usually had a pretty hard ceiling. But Belfort, he just completely ignored that ceiling. By age 16, he's making 20 grand selling Italian ices. Post-college, he actually started a door-to-door meat and seafood business. It was incredibly scrappy, pulling in like $100,000 a month in sales with literally melting steaks in his backseat, before it ultimately went bankrupt. But listen, the crucial point here isn't the failure of the meat business. It's what he learned from the wreckage. His true superpower wasn't a specific product at all. It wasn't Italian ices or salmon or stocks. It was the sheer, undeniable ability to sell absolutely anything to anyone.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, Building the Boiler Room. He knew he needed a bigger payout, so he took that relentless pitch of his straight to Wall Street. He landed an entry-level job at a totally legit firm, LF Rothschild, where he was learning how real money and power moved. But then, October 1987 happened, Black Monday. The markets crashed, and just like that, Jordan lost his job. But, where others mourned, he saw this massive opportunity. The crash actually led him to discover the unregulated, Wild West world of penny stocks. We're talking pink sheet garbage companies that no serious broker would ever touch. But they had one magical feature for a guy like Belfort: 50% commissions. Yep, 10 times the reward for the exact same pitch. All he needed was a fast phone and a faster mouth. So, founded in 1989 with his chaotic, fast-talking partner Danny Porush, they named their new firm Stratton Oakmont. And that name, it sounds incredibly prestigious, right? Like some 100-year legacy with rich mahogany and leather-bound books. But the reality? It was a strip mall boiler room in Long Island with flickering lights, mismatched desks, and absolutely zero regulatory oversight. The whole operation was built entirely on smoke and mirrors from literally day one. And to staff this boiler room, Belfort wasn't exactly hiring experienced Wall Street analysts. No, he hired hungry, unqualified working-class kids, bartenders, dropouts, people looking for a way out. And to turn them into stone-cold closers, he invented what he called straight-line persuasion. This was an intense psychological pressure cooker. He trained these raw recruits to just bulldoze hesitation, drown out any doubt, and violently guide a prospect from hello all the way to where do I send the check in a single unbroken line. It was highly manipulative, but man, was it highly effective. All right, Chapter 3, The Pump and Dump, and I'm going to speed up my pace a bit here, just so you can really feel the chaotic energy of that boiler room. Okay, so here was the exact playbook. Step 1, they'd buy massive blocks of incredibly cheap shares. Sometimes these were real IPOs, but mostly garbage companies that barely existed outside of a typed-up press release. Step 2, they'd turn the sales floor into a full-blown hype machine, making high-pressure calls, feeding investors completely manufactured fake excitement. Step 3, once the price inevitably spiked from all that hype, Belfort and his insiders would secretly dump all their shares at the absolute peak. And Step 4, they just walked away, leaving the investors holding the bag as the stock price completely crashed. And the worst part? Stratton intentionally targeted the working class, retirees, and desperate parents. They were selling false certainty to the exact people that Wall Street historically ignored. Now, to keep this vicious machine running, the firm evolved into what we can really only call the Stratton Carnival. The office was just an absolute blur of screaming phones and blaring air horns. Belfort deliberately bred this cult-like loyalty. Top performers treated like absolute royalty, but underperformers were violently humiliated and fired on the spot.
And fueling literally all of this was rampant, unhinged narcotics use. We're talking strippers in the conference room, champagne pouring directly into the fax machines. It was total chaos, but it was specifically designed to fuel the sales engine and completely mask the underlying rot of the firm. Which brings us to Chapter 4, Smoke, Mirrors, and Paranoia. So by 1994, Stratton Oakmont was making so much noise it was pulling in national attention. The SEC had started flagging their suspicious filings. Investor complaints were heavily piling up. I mean, people who bought in at $7 were watching their stocks violently crash to 30 cents. Internally, even some of the brokers were starting to question why they were pushing stocks for companies with no revenue and disconnected phone numbers. Naturally, Belfort had to start hiding the money. His asset protection methods became increasingly complex and highly illegal. Millions were funneled into offshore shell companies. He parked funds in Geneva under fake company names. At one point, he was literally having couriers, including an actual housekeeper, smuggle envelopes of cash sewn right into their clothes. It was incredibly desperate. And his personal life unraveling just as dangerously. Fast forward to June 1996, and his drug-fueled arrogance is spiraling entirely out of control. Against his own captain's strict warnings, a high and drunk Belfort actually insisted they sail his luxury yacht, named after his wife, by the way, from Italy to Sardinia, right into the teeth of a massive storm. He genuinely believed nothing could touch him. Well, the yacht took on water in the middle of the sea. Belfort, his family, and over $2 million in jewelry and narcotics had to be rescued by the Italian Navy before the ship was completely destroyed. He survived, but let me tell you, that illusion of invincibility totally shattered. And that leads us right into Chapter 5, the FBI closes in. So the suspense really builds here. On one side, you have Jordan Belfort. He's erratic, he's unraveling, making high-profile, completely reckless mistakes, like crashing his Ferrari while high with his own daughter in the car. But on the exact opposite side, you have FBI agent Gregory Coleman. And Coleman didn't make a sound. He didn't just see red flags, he smelled blood. He was quietly, meticulously piecing together a massive timeline, tracking subpoenaed wire records, digging into real estate purchases that didn't match reported incomes, pulling old cold call scripts. It was a classic cat and mouse game, the silent hunter versus the loud, wounded prey. And eventually, Agent Coleman found the thread. $50,000. That is the specific, highly suspicious amount Belfort was consistently withdrawing in cashier's checks, laundering them right through casinos and art galleries. This repeated pattern of $50,000 withdrawals, it blared like a literal siren to the FBI. It was the hard proof that the money laundering was actively happening. Then came the absolute breaking point, October 1996. The FBI finally raids Stratton Oakmont. Just after sunrise, federal agents storm the boiler room. Phones are ripped right from the desks, hard drives are completely copied, filing cabinets emptied out. And inside that once tight-knit, cult-like firm, total paranoia completely took over. Employees who used to cheer for Belfort suddenly turned on each other. Turns out, some had already been wearing wires out of pure self-preservation, handing over recorded calls and folders to the feds just to save their own skin. But Belfort's ultimate, truly fatal mistake actually happened a bit later, in early 1997, $2 million. While he was under intense, explicit investigation, and after being told directly by authorities not to move any funds, Belfort arrogantly wires $2 million straight to Switzerland. The thing is, the feds were monitoring everything. The transaction was instantly traced, the conversation about it was recorded, and that single massive transfer was the final thread that unraveled his entire empire. The chase was officially over.
Chapter 6, Selling the Story. Now facing up to 30 years in federal prison for wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering, Belfort did what he always did. He sold, but this time around he was selling information. He flipped on his partners, his friends, and the young kids he had literally trained to worship him, all by wearing a wire. He ended up handing over more than 30 employees to the FBI. And his reward for tearing down his own empire? He served just 22 months. Yeah, 22 months in a minimum security facility where there were no fences, and he literally spent his mornings playing tennis and his afternoons lifting weights. I mean, think about that. That was the punishment for a massive financial crime.
This really snaps us right out of that cinematic illusion, doesn't it? Let's look at the actual outcomes here. While in prison, Belfort wrote a memoir. That memoir turned into a blockbuster movie deal, and now he tours the world as a famous motivational speaker. But what about the victims? We're talking about teachers who lost their retirement funds, war veterans who lost their life savings, families pushed into crushing debt.
So while Belfort walked away with incredible fame, his victims were completely devastated and honestly largely forgotten.
And this part gets incredibly frustrating. $110 million. That is the massive amount of court-ordered restitution Belfort was supposed to pay back to the very people he scammed. To this day, only a tiny fraction of that has actually been paid. The rest, it's just mysteriously vanished into offshore accounts, real estate trusts, and complex legal loopholes. He claims he's working on it, but those victims, they're still waiting.
So all of this history, all of this suspense leaves us with a truly chilling question at the end of the day. Why did we applaud? Just think about it for a second. He relentlessly lied to investors, ruined countless lives, and completely escaped real justice. Yet society turned his crimes into a blockbuster and made a convicted fraudster into a massive pop culture icon. He wears the name The Wolf like a badge of honor rather than the permanent scar it really should be. Did we turn a blind eye because deep down a part of our society actually idolizes that kind of unchecked greed? It's a suspenseful piece of reality that leaves us to really ponder our own collective complicity. Anyway, thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking the hard questions, and I'll see you next time.